Hi, welcome to One Eye on the Page. I am Scott. This is Five-Year Battle Agatha Christie, years 1971 through. Let's get started. Now, I say 1971 through whatever because she published 5 books between 1971 and 1975. She published a book in 1976 posthumously, and then there was a book published in 1997. I'm not going to do a 5-year battle for 76 through 80 and 96 through 2000 for one book each. So I'm just putting those books in this 5-year period. It does screw with the name of the series, but I just didn't really see any other way around it. These are the final books of her career. She passed away, I believe, in 1975. I mentioned in the previous video there was some possibility. People thought that she may have had dementia and Alzheimer's. That may have affected the books, possibly, except for 2 of them, which I will get into later. But let's go ahead and get started with them. Book number 1, published in 1971, is Nemesis, a Miss Marple book. It is her second to last Miss Marple book. Miss Marple receives a notification from the lawyers of Jason Raphael, who was in a Caribbean mystery, that he is leaving her money in his will. He has died. But to get it, she has to solve a crime. He's not going to tell her what the crime is. For reasons? He has his reasons. They don't really make sense, but it it's plot driven. Okay, you got to have her figure it out so we whatever. Miss Marple goes on vacation because that's what Miss Marple does in these later books to solve crimes. Is she goes on vacation to solve a crime or to be there when a murder happens. It is a decent Marple book. The mystery is fine. The characters are generally pretty good. Although I have to say, a lot of the woman characters in here, I still hadn't figured out the differences between some of them by the end of the novel. So, and also, it didn't really matter for some of them if I figured out if they were different. I will also say I can't really get a lot of the mystery because this novel is probably the closest she has come to talking about homosexuality. It seems very clear to me. It did not seem clear to me like way back when. If I would have read this book then, it would have flown right over my head. But it seems very clear now. This is the only case where I think there is homosexuality in her books. It's kind of offstage homosexuality. It's talked about more than seen, except possibly for Mr. Satterthwaite. But he was a bachelor who was really into art and uh, was often referred to having feminine qualities. He was never explicitly stated to be gay, just gay coded. I don't necessarily think that this book does anything for homosexuality. Basically, Christie refers to it as a phase kind of thing. But I think the novel overall is decent. Obviously, it's going to be number 1 for now. Book number 2 is a short story collection. It is The Golden Ball and Other Stories, published in 1971. There are no series stories in here. There's no Perot, no Miss Marple. I read this book, couldn't tell you anything about it. I went online and read about the stories, and it's like, oh yeah, I read that story. Nothing is memorable in any of these. I will say this was published in 1971, but the stories themselves were published in publications in the 20s. But they're just, I think there's a reason why these stories were published in 1971 because they're bottom of the barrel stories. And I will state what I have stated before. Christie short stories generally don't do much for me. Rare exceptions, but generally I like Christie mysteries, and mysteries are better if they're in novel form. Short story mysteries, at least with Christie, aren't particularly intriguing to me. I don't think she ever really mastered the short story mystery in a way that perhaps like Arthur Conan Doyle did. Now, I will also say Christie novel mysteries are much better than Sherlock Holmes novel mysteries. That's just my opinion. I'm going to put this one under Nemesis for now. Book number 3 is Elephants Can Remember, published in 1972. It's a pro novel that's written in the latter half of Christie's career. So guess who his sidekick is? Oh yeah, it's Ariadne Oliver, of course, as it would be. Uh, she wants him to look in the death of the parents of her goddaughter because the goddaughter is getting married, and she wants to make sure that insanity doesn't run in her family or something. So he is investigating deaths in the past, which he has done before, particularly in Five Little Pigs, where I think was a great book. This book is not a great book. Basically, he interviews 5 people, 5 elephants, who were around then to get the solution to why her parents died. This is the last Poirot novel that Christie wrote. Again, I don't think it's her worst Poirot novel, but it is just not good. And I I like Poirot to be there on the scene for a current murder, unless it's this amazing book like Five Little Pigs. And yeah, this just it doesn't do anything for me. Uh, hmm, hmm. I'm actually going to put this under Nemesis. Book number 4 is Postern of Fate. Published in 1973, it is the last Tommy and Tuppence book. It is also a spy book, also about the poisoning of a female spy during World War I. So it's elderly Tommy and Tuppence investigating the murder of a female spy. This book is awful. Um, it's so sad to go from By the Pricking of My Thumbs, which was an excellent Tommy and Tuppence book, the best Tommy and Tuppence book, I think, and then go to this, which is just drivel. It's just awful. Tommy and Tuppence, as I will say through all 5 books, except By the Pricking of My Thumb, they just deserve so much more. They're great characters, never had the material that matched their characters. I'm going to put this under, no, okay. It's a novel, so I'm going to put it above The Golden Ball and Other Stories, but it's still an awful book. Book number 5, published in 1975. The last book published before her death is Curtain. It is a Poirot novel, does not have Ariadne Oliver in it. It has Captain Hastings in it. And after, what, almost 40 years, we finally get Captain Hastings back, and I look at him and I say, I used to dislike you so much, but now that you're back, I still don't like you because you're still the same idiot you have always been. Where's Ariadne Oliver? But of course, I just went through puberty. Of course, when Agatha Christie wrote this book, she hadn't written Ariadne Oliver, at least not in a pro book. I don't. It was written in the 40s. I don't know if she had written Oliver by then, but she hadn't appeared in a pro novel yet. But she wrote this book in the 1940s to be Pro's last book. It's an okay book. I think, and it does rank high on a lot of people's lists. I think solely for the fact that it is Pro's last book. I don't think it's that good. I don't think that Pro's solution to the mystery is warranted. I think it doesn't make any sense. The murderer is nowhere near the top level murderers that Pro has faced. And other than Pro being elderly, I don't see any reason why Pro feels that this murder is in any way a match for him. I think Hastings is a disappointment in this book. He's so much older, but he's still a bumbling idiot who no one respects. He has a grown daughter in here, and she doesn't respect him, and she's honestly a drag. I don't like her. I don't like any of the characters in here. I don't. I don't like Pro. I mean, it's written in the 40s, but Pro's not as grumpy as he is in later novels, but he's not the Pro I knew from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. It's going to be number one. I mean, because everything else so far is blah. But I just don't believe it's anywhere near as good a book as some people may think it is. And I think it's quite possibly the best book that she's written after 19, or she's published, sorry, not written, that she's published after 1970, but it's still not a good book. You have to appear in every video, don't you? So then we have her uh, last novel, uh, published posthumously. It is Sleeping Murder. It is a Miss Marple book. It was also believed to have been written in the 1940s. So this was supposed to be Miss Marple's last book, which I don't know if she wrote it to be her last book, but she did write it in the 1940s and just set it aside. It's way more low key than the last Pro novel. There are things that happen in the Pro novel that make you say, "Oh yeah, that's the last Pro novel." I won't spoil you, but what's the name of the Pro novel? It's also set in 1944, so it's set in World War II. It's set before many of the other Miss Marple books, so it's not even like meant to be her last book chronologically. It's just the last one published. A newlywed, Gwenda finds a new home and encounters strange things, and then has to freak out how to play. I don't think that this was a bad book. I don't. I like Gwenda for one. I liked a lot of the lead up. I just think, and perhaps it's just because I have read so much Christie, it's like, oh yeah, this is like a follow your adventure Christie murder solution. It's like, no, there's no surprise at all here. By the way, I didn't show you. Uh, that's my copy of Curtain, the only book I have for these years, and I bought this many years ago. I've had this book for a while. It, the price is $1.95. Sleeping Murder. Yeah, it's just a very low key, and I don't like the solution. I do like the characters. I really like Gwenda. I like her husband, but he does make much of an appearance at the beginning of the novel. I don't think Miss Marple is as she's in it plenty, but I don't think she has much of an impact in it as she does in other novels, including novels in which she doesn't play a large part in. I think largely based on Gwenda and my liking of that character, I am going to place it above the previous Miss Marple book, Nemesis. And for right now, it is going to be in the number 2 spot. So the last book published, and it was published in 1997. It is Harlequin Tea Set, published in 1997. It includes a Hercule Poirot story, The Mystery of the Spanish Chest. And I do want to point out, I have said this before, but if you are some here at this video without watch a previous video, I am going by the U.S. editions of short story collections. I know the UK has vastly different ones. I'm going by what we have in the U.S. All the U.S. collections have the same stories as the UK publications, just not necessarily in the same books. So, but this one has the Hercule Poirot story, The Mystery of the Spanish Chess, which was published in many different publications, several different books, I think. It's okay. There is also a Harley Quinn story in here. I like all Harley Quinn stories. The Mysterious Mr. Quinn, the short story collection, is actually one of the winners of my 5-year battles. All amazing stories. And there are like 2 other stories, I believe, that were published, including in this one. I believe this one is The Love Detectives, maybe? I'm forgetting the title. And it's good. It's just not as great as that original set. But it is better than Elephants Can Remember, and it is definitely better than Postern of Fate. So it is going to be in the number 4 slot. So the final 7 books of Agatha Christie's career are number 7, The Golden Ball and Other Stories. Number 6, Postern of Fate, the last Tommy and Tuppence novel. Just a disappointment. Tommy and Tuppence deserved so much better. Number 5, Elephants Can Remember, the last written Hercule Poirot novel. Just not a good novel. Number 4 is Harlequin Tea Set, a decent short story collection, especially for her last short story collection. Number 3, still not a good novel, is Nemesis, the second to last Miss Marple story. Number 2 is Sleeping Murder, the last published Miss Marple novel in the 1940s, I believe. A decent Miss Marple novel, but as her last one, not a huge deal. Number 1, pretty much on a technicality, I guess, is Curtain, the very last published Hercule Poirot novel, originally written in the 1940s, but meant to be his last novel. It's not a great book. It's just the best book published in this time frame. It's nowhere. It's mediocre Poirot, and I know that is probably not the opinion of a lot of people, but hey, it's still number 1 for the years 1971 to 1997. So it's the best book in a 26-year span. So it's going to be in the final 11 books battling for the number 1 position. I'm going to spoil you. It's not going to be number 1. I don't know what to tell you because it's pretty evident I don't think much of the book. So I'm not going to, there are better battles ahead. So, but that is the last 5-year battle. Next time, we're going to get into the elimination of 6 books to get into the final 8. All right. So I have my final 11 here. Next week, I'm going to have the man in the brown suit face off against Mrs. McGinty's dad for their way into the final 8. Also, the mirror cracked from side to side versus Curtain for their way into the final 8. And finally, Ordeal by Innocence versus Endless Night for their way into the final eight. And in the final eight, it will be And Then There Were None versus the winner of one of those. Mysterious Mr. Quinn versus Death Comes at the End. Murder on the Orient Express versus the winner of one of those. And Crooked House against the order of one of those. And I want to point out something that I find very interesting. I only have 3 Hercule Poirot books in the final 11, which is amazing to me. I do have, I only have one Miss Marple book. And that Miss Marple book is not Murder at the Vicarage, which is probably my favorite Miss Marple book. But it was just a stacked field that 5 year period. And I have one short story collection, of course, The Mysterious Mr. Quinn. So next week I'll be starting that, and then the 4 weeks after that I will have the quarterfinal face off, and after the quarterfinals are done, I will have the semifinals and the finals in my last video. So let's see where we're going to go. What's going to be the number one book? Please like and comment, subscribe, and I will talk to you next time.